And I dare say that is an irreversible event.
It is. Why do you ask such a question?
To make out your character, Mr. Darcy.
And what have you discovered?
Very little. To hear such different accounts of you has puzzled me exceedingly.
I hope to afford you more clarity in the future.
Welcome to Write the Truth. My name is Patricia Guzar, the author of Where the Stars Hide, a young adult dystopian fantasy available on Amazon right now. And today I want to discuss the enemies to lovers trope and what makes it really good, what makes it desirable, and how to write a good enemies to lovers story and what to avoid when you're trying to write an enemies to lovers story. Yeah, we're getting into that today. I have this guilty pleasure for enemy to lovers. And I don't know, maybe that people might not say that's not a guilty pleasure, that is a normal. But I have a huge guilty pleasure for it. And in fact, my gateway into romance was a enemies to lovers story. Now, I've thought about this a lot. And I want to go to the mother of enemies to lovers, and that would be Pride and Prejudice. Absolutely. Now, if you don't know what Pride and Prejudice is, it's a classic. I'm pretty sure most people know what Pride and Prejudice is, but if you're young and you just kind of getting into the world and you don't know, look it up. Definitely, it is the blueprint for enemies to lovers, and it's what got me into romance back in the 1700s when Jane Austen made it really popular. She changed the writing world forever. Sometimes we think we know the formula for making this really juicy, good, steamy story when we think we have all the pieces, but I feel like sometimes when I read a story, or if I'm listening or I'm watching a movie, there might be something missing. And one movie or TV show I'm very disappointed with would be Bridgeton season 2. I don't know. It had the enemies to lovers trope that we all are waiting for and wanting to get into. And about the time we get to the end, we didn't get what we wanted. Bridgeton obviously is very, very much inspired by Jane Austen's work. Like, that's literally obviously what they're inspired by. It's pretty obvious. And I have been brewing in my mind a lot. Like, you can read something, consume something, really enjoy it, but don't even really know why. No, you don't know why, at what point that you get what what we're here for. You get that dopamine hit, you get that estrogen hit where you're like, your pupils get big and you're like, ah. And it's not really the steamy parts. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the steamy parts, and I feel like we miss out on all these little details that are so important in a story. And this is probably why, for me specifically, I really do enjoy like a lot of Asian dramas, because they hone into the details of love rather than shooting straight towards like the steamy scenes. Now, first recipe, obviously, two lovers who aren't lovers yet. And this could be in any genre. It could be in a fantasy genre where there's two kingdoms who hate each other, and maybe the princess of one kingdom is trying to fight for her kingdom against the enemy kingdom of, the man. Somehow they get together, they hate each other. I feel like something like that, that's probably more of a steamy side of the enemies to lovers genre. I don't even know if enemies to lover is necessarily a genre. We're just gonna call it a genre. Or you can even do just your typical contemporary story of two people who probably grew up together and always had issues with one another. And they've always fought. They've always never seen eye to eye. Or it could be a competitive spirit. Maybe they're in college. Maybe they're in school. And you have these two people who are having to be together, or always competing, and maybe have to work on a project. And there's always this competition. Next part might be somehow they keep running into each other. Whether that be in a school project, whether that be just through friends or family, like somehow they have to, because the truth is, if you're an enemy of somebody, why would you be in their presence? But something keeps happening where they have to be in the same room as each other. Early on, there is some attraction. There has to be, obviously, it's not just enemies, but there has to be some type of conflict in the beginning. So in Pride and Prejudice, the first conflict when Mr. Darcy comes into the picture, he's already described as like being very like standoffish, and he's kind of scary to see from afar. He doesn't seem very inviting. And then Elizabeth overhears him talking about her and pretty much calls her basic. Pretty much says that she's basic and she's not really, he doesn't really see that she's that special. And she overhears that. And what does she do in return? She kind of lets him know, like, actually I did hear what you said. She doesn't rightly say it, but she shows off her character of her charm, and she shows off, like, that she's actually very witty and adorable and fun, and kind of does a little jab at him to show him, like, I heard what you said about me, and no, you are an asshole. That's not exactly how it goes, but that's essentially kind of what happens. And at that moment, although we don't necessarily see it, we get a small picture of it. We kind of see that Mr. Darcy, although he is not yet in love with her, he is kind of interested. He's intrigued by her. And as the story progresses, we start to see that he is becoming a little bit interested in her. Now, Elizabeth doesn't know this. The reader might get a little bit of hint. The person watching the movie might get a little bit of a hint. But it's not there yet. There's still like this tension between them. But somehow they keep having to run into each other. They keep finding themselves in the same room. So creating that space, obviously, where there's a conflict between them, there's an offense that happened. We have to somehow, be civilized in a room together. But just know that I don't actually like you. But then, every once in a while you get this little hint of, romance. It's like you're progressing to this place where this really important thing is going to happen. And it's the most important part. In the second season of Bridgeton, this did not happen. And I sat and I waited and it never happened. And it was very disappointing. And so what is this thing that must happen? So in Bridgeton, I loved Bridgeton because you had this character, this female character who's very like to herself. She's very, uptight. She's not flirty. She's not super girly. She's just like very responsible. And I really like that character because she kind of reminds me of myself. Just kind of very standoffish, not really open, kind of keeps to herself, not vulnerable at all. Then you have this male character who is very, very tough, very masculine, very authoritative. And they both are very similar because they're both very stubborn. And, they do kind of find themselves in the same place together. They have to interact somehow. We start to see that actually maybe she's interested in him. Maybe he's interested in her. And it kind of stayed like that. It kind of stayed in this like limbo of we hate each other, but they kind of pulled out this more of a sexual tension between them. And then they did one thing. There was a moment where I thought this was going to happen. I thought it was going to give me those feelings of like, no, it didn't do it. It was the scene where the bee came and he freaked out because he had some trauma with a bee because his mother died from a bee sting. And she came to his rescue and she helped him calm down, and they got really, really close to one another. It became this like romantic moment, but it was weird because it's like, why is soothing this guy from his trauma suddenly turn into sexual tension? Because that's what I was kind of getting. I was kind of getting this, oh, there's sexual tension between us, rather than, oh wow, you're actually a really good woman and you've protected me. So as the story progressed, we're still waiting for that moment, and we get to the end and they never do the thing that I'm going to tell you. And that thing is, drum roll, I know it's going to sound really stupid. One of them, specifically the guy, has to confess his feelings. Yes, confess. confess how he feels. And for some reason, it sounds so basic and not a big deal, but that's the part that literally changes everything. If the guy is the one who's been an asshole this whole time, maybe even it might be just her perceiving him to be an asshole. Maybe he hasn't actually done anything really bad, but in her mind, she hates him so much. No matter what he does, it's annoying. No matter what he says, she hates him, like everything. But at some point, comes out of nowhere, and he just says how he feels about her. In Pride and Prejudice, that's exactly what happens. She is literally perceiving him as a horrible person. She starts to get to, like, you know, maybe kind of get to know him a little bit more and maybe change her perspective. But then she learns that he's the reason for why her sister isn't married to the one that she's in love with. And he broke them up. And she was pissed. And she ran away. And he chased after her. He comes out of nowhere and just goes, "Elizabeth, I have not been able to sleep. I've been thinking about you for a long time, and I don't really care what anyone thinks, but I just want you to know I'm in love with you." And you're just like, what? And your brain just probably, can you imagine being her? Your brain probably just shuts off because you're just like, excuse me, what? It changes everything because you took this strong, brutal man that, you know, who is the opposite of what just happened. He has confessed his feelings. He has become vulnerable. And for a lot of women, when a man becomes vulnerable, that makes us fall in love with them. It just does. Not all men, but especially if they're an attractive man. You know, it does something to our brains. We just like, did this man just show me his heart? Is he giving me his heart? And so that's what happens. He confesses his feelings. And although she rejects him, which that continues the story, being rejected afterwards, that continues the story on, because now you got a man who literally put his heart out there. He, you know, pretty much set himself up for heartbreak. And that's horrible. And it's kind of like, you know, that's kind of the middle of the story. He confesses feelings. She is shocked and she rejects him, and now he feels stupid. He just told a girl how he feels. He practically said, "I'm in love with you," and she throws pie in my face and runs off. But now what happens? Now this girl has been left with this virus put in her mind that this man is in love with her, and she had never even considered it. She hadn't thought about it because this whole time she thought he hated her and she hated him. As the story progressed, she starts to actually see that Mr. Darcy isn't actually all that bad. It probably is because he confessed his love to her, and she started to see things a lot differently, until it got to the point where he fits the thing that, you know, that upset her. He fits the relationship between her sister and the one she fell in love with, and he went back and fixed the whole thing. And then he even did more. He saved her pretty much. He not only did he help his sister, but there was another family crisis that he kind of came into and rescued her for. He saved her. He saved her family from like a huge humiliation, and he pretty much fixed everything. Now, this doesn't mean just because a man confesses love to you, it doesn't mean that, oh well, I guess I have to like you now. No, he not only did he did that, he fixed all the things that she had in her mind about him. He fixed it, corrected it, and she felt safe to love him back. And then the story ends where he comes to her, and this is the other thing. After being rejected, after being rejected the first time, he comes back after redeeming himself. After kind of getting closer and becoming her friend, he comes back for another opportunity to possibly be rejected. He comes back and he tells her how he feels again. And at this point, Elizabeth's heart has been softened, and it just shows the humbleness of this man. Like, if you come back the first time I reject you, and then you're coming back the second time, and you're not begging me, but you're literally, that's how valuable she feels. She feels so valuable to this man that he's willing to come back for a possible second rejection. But to be pursued the way Mr. Darcy pursued Elizabeth, that, including the rest of the part of the story, is like a perfect enemies to lovers story. And so yes, it is a very good example of it. And like I said, the confession, and I think the girl can also confess in the story that she kind of humbles herself and confess how she really feels for the male protagonist. I mean, I guess he would be the antagonist because the stories are usually for the girl, so maybe he's the antagonist. But I feel like it just doesn't hit the same when the male is the one to do it. Because why is it that it hits more when the male has to confess how he feels? It hits more because you're taking a man who, usually men aren't the ones who are the best at feelings. They're not the best at communicating their feelings. And you're taking a character who doesn't do this. He's not a soft, sensitive character. He is very brutal. He's very strong. He's not vulnerable. He will never show anybody his vulnerable parts. But then he shows it to this specific woman. And that's the part that changes the whole story around. That's the part that we all love. And then from there, we're all like hooked. As soon as that happened, we're hooked. And you're reeling us in until you get to the final part of the story. So that is why we love enemies to lovers stories. At least I love enemies to lovers stories. Like I said, people like the steamy parts. And I get that. I totally get the whole, you got two people who hate each other, they're fighting, they're angry, somehow in this weird situation, they have sexual tension, and then they end up sleeping together, and it's just this like amazing, you know, steamy set scene. I get it. I feel like it's cheap though. It's very cheap. This confession thing, it comes out unexpected. You're not even asking for a date. You're telling them that you're in love with them. And literally, what happens next can make or break the male character. It can either make him stronger, make him a better character, or it can make him a horrible character. And I feel like it happens in real life. When people get their heart broken, it can either make them a better man, or it makes them a worse man and become a player. Because they never want to ever have to feel pain again from rejection. And rejection, yes, I feel like it's one of the strongest feelings. Rejection. No one wants to be rejected. We all want to be accepted. And to be rejected for the one thing that no one can easily have, your heart, for your heart to get rejected is pretty scary. So thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate you guys taking your time and listening to this. I hope that you guys took something from this, and tell me guys what you think. Do you guys think I'm right about this? Like, do you guys have any other like points in enemies to lovers story that I did not hit on that's really, really important, that you might be even more important than the confession? Let me know in the comments, because I really would be interested in hearing what you guys have to say. So thank you and peace.